Good evening, everyone. I don't see very many people. Oh, here we go. There was some problem with the live stream. I uploaded the live stream as normal, but unfortunately, nobody was getting notifications. So it seems you're getting notifications now. So apologies about that. I'm not sure exactly what went wrong. So what are we going to talk about tonight? Of course, what's happening in Gaza. Talk about Honest Bob Jenrick. I have a clip I want to show you with him. Reform have a new chairman. Remember, they had a previous chairman. He resigned over a tweet he resigned by tweet over comments in the House of Commons. And a few other stories, the U-turn on the winter fuel allowance I want to cover as well. So I just want to welcome everyone in because there was a bit of a problem with the live stream tonight for some reason. I don't know. Usually it's my fault, but this time it wasn't. So hope everyone is well. Hope you had a nice weekend and welcome to the live stream. So let's start off with Reform UK first and then we'll move on to some other stories. But this is interesting. Mother of Farage aide George Cottrell revealed as Reform UK's biggest donor. Remember, Party of the People, the People's Army. Electoral Commission figures show Fiona Cottrell has given £750,000 in contributions to the party over the past year. The biggest donor to Reform UK has been revealed as the mother of the unpaid party aide and convicted fraudster. What was the vetting process for this? Of course, there was no vetting process. Just give us money and we'll give you a job. Fraudster George Cottrell. Fiona Cottrell, an aristocrat and former girlfriend of King Charles in the 1970s, donated £250,000 in March, making her total contributions up to £750,000 over the past year. Once again, Party of the People. It begs the question: what does your average voter for Reform think about this? They probably will never actually read these stories because they're not interested. They're more obsessed with immigrants or people on benefits. Latest figures from the Electoral Commission show Reform failed to raise as much money as the Conservatives, despite it claimed to be capturing its rival party donors. The Tories raised 3.3 million, Labour 2.3 million, and Reform and the Liberal Democrats about 1.5 million each, excluding public funds. Look, I think there are a lot of people maybe not willing to donate a huge amount of money at the moment when it comes to Reform, because they're still not a serious party. At least with the Conservatives, that, well, if they get into government, well, they're going to give you the contracts. But with Reform, you don't really know what they're going to do. And there is a real risk that they'll crash the economy, a bit like the Tories, but not to the same, worse than the Tories. So I think some donors are maybe holding back. Some of them are probably thinking, well, maybe we can, if you're a donor to the Conservative Party, it takes a lot to convince you to donate to Reform. Because a lot of these people have been donating to I'm completely against the donations. Donations should be banned. There should be no one donating to political parties. I believe political parties should be publicly funded, or if you don't want to go down that road, they should have something that Andrew Yang in the US was pushing, this idea of democracy dollars. So this idea that every citizen gets like $10 or £10 and they can donate this money to whatever political party they want to help them campaign. So you would have a level playing field and people would be able to support the party. Even if you have no money, everyone would receive this sort of money that would have to be spent on political donations or to promote political parties. So I think this would be a good way, but I think political parties should be publicly funded. You shouldn't rely on donors, because what happens we saw what happened when it came to donors and the pandemic. You donate to the Conservative Party and you get a PPE contract. So that needs to stop, but unfortunately I don't think we'll see any of that happening anytime soon. However, the donations to Reform show that the party is attracting a wider breadth of donors than before Nigel returned as leader, when it was largely kept afloat by loans from its then leader and now deputy Richard Tice. Fiona Contrell started giving money last year. Her son George is regularly at Farage's side, including at a party fundraiser earlier this year, on the election campaign trail, and at the event to announce Reform's new chair on Tuesday. His role in the party has been described as an unpaid volunteer, but he has also paid for trips by Farage to the US and Brussels. So this could be some guy who's, I don't know, being groomed as a senior individual in Reform, or I don't know. I think for Reform, once again, Reform represent a party of the rich for the rich. So of course he's going to surround himself with very rich people who have very deep pockets. So if Reform get into a bit of a fix, into a problem, well, these people can help it out. The whole membership thing is just a front. The whole membership thing is not even members, they're subscribers. They have no control over the party. They may think that it's like a normal party where you become a member, then you get to vote on the leadership, but not in Reform UK. Okay, I want to cover another few stories related to Reform before we move on. TV presenter David Bull named new Reform chairman. Isn't it strange how somebody who used to be on TV, Talk TV, of course, pro-Reform Talk TV, now is made the chair of Reform UK. Of course, he used to be an MEP for the Brexit party, but it shows how GB News and Talk TV are just propagandists for Reform. They never challenge them. They never hold them to account. It's basically just a propaganda wing of. But in both cases, because Talk TV never challenged Richard Tice or Nigel Farage, they just pandered to them. And of course, GB News, gave Nigel Farage a job. Anyway, so Talk TV host David Bull has been named as Reform UK's new chairman, replacing Zia Youssef, who quit last week after clashing with colleagues over calls for a burqa ban. A long-time ally of the party leader, Nigel Farage, 56-year-old Bull, has held several roles in Reform and his predecessor, the Brexit Party, but is best known for his work as a broadcaster. The appointment of the polished media performer contrasts with multimillionaire businessman Youssef, a 38-year-old political newcomer who largely worked behind the scenes as chairman to professionalise the party. Speaking at an event in London, Farage said Bull's job was not to get involved in the admin, but to give leadership to activists. Rather than appointing a direct successor, Reform UK is splitting Youssef's role into multiple posts, including new head of operations and head of treasury, with new further leadership challenges in the coming weeks. In the coming weeks after. Farage said Bull's role would be to inspire the party's base and to give leadership to that volunteer army out there. The People's Army. Bull said he was deeply honoured to be asked to serve as chairman. However, he said Reform UK's rapid growth in recent months had led to the party failing to look after the volunteer side of the party. Imagine volunteering for Reform UK. Like volunteering for a billionaire or a millionaire. Literally in some cases. So Youssef has been demoted, is back but demoted. Yeah, it seems to be the case. Don't know what he returned for. Maybe he was hoping to get his old job back, and they were like, no, we're not going to give you your old job back. We'll put you in the back office. I honestly don't know what Zia Youssef gets out of this. Is it an investment? And he's hoping, well, I'm going to get a return on this investment sometime down the road. I think people need to be really attentive to what Reform UK are going to do in these councils. So where they have seats in the councils or where they're actually running the councils, I think there's going to be massive amounts of corruption. I've mentioned this before. They keep talking about, well, there's a lot of contracts that need to be renewed, and we need to give these contracts to companies that are competent. Now, which companies? So I think it'll be very interesting, and I hope Byline Times or other reputable sources, they go after this. They really monitor what's going on, because I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of corruption where friends of Reform UK or donors to Reform UK are given contracts. I can guarantee that's going to happen. So if the council is like, we need somebody to repair the potholes. Oh, wait a minute. Look, there's this guy who donated to Reform UK or campaigns for Reform UK. We'll give him the contract. And if it's a Reform-run council, they're going to be able to overrule anyone who disagrees with them. Claire Sweet, great to see you on the stream tonight. Sir Larry the cat is here. They gave him a back office position. Yes. So, but honestly, I don't know what Zia Youssef is expecting unless it's something later on, which could be the case. Hate to admit it, but it's looking almost guaranteed Farage will be the next Prime Minister. Certainly the case if the AI-generated star remains Labour leader. I'm afraid so, Sean. What are we hearing from... So Labour have come out today and they said, look, we're U-turning on the winter fuel allowance, but we're not going to apologise. So they're not taking my advice. They didn't take my advice from months ago when I said you shouldn't be going ahead with this policy. And it's not just me, of course, but others have said it as well. But there was an opportunity to steal the thunder away from the Conservatives and Reform and other parties as well. But let's double down on this terrible position, on this terrible policy, and hope for the best, even though members of the Labour Party were completely against it. I hope there are going to be more U-turns, but they need to come out and say, look, we're U-turning because this is a bad policy. We got it wrong. We want to fix it. That's what we need. We're sorry. Wouldn't it be wonderful if they actually said, we are sorry? But Keir Starmer was asked about it today and he said, no, we're not sorry because the situation has changed. Labour's communications are awful. They are terrible. Who's running these communications? And then if you look at some of the content that they put out, individual MPs have some pretty good content, but the party itself is absolutely terrible. The thing is, Reform are taking the winter fuel allowance reversal as a win for them. Yes. See, there was an opportunity to fix it at the very beginning and then not give Farage the chance to weaponise it. And then what did they do? They let Farage and the Tories weaponise it. And then Farage is saying, they U-turned because of me. I moved the government. What's the point in voting for the Labour Party if they follow my lead? Why not just vote for me? That would be his argument going into the next election. I convinced the Conservatives to do this. I convinced the Labour Party to do this. They didn't listen to me until it was necessary, until they had to. It's a lie, of course, but if you don't communicate things right, or if you don't listen to voters, like when it comes to the winter fuel allowance, what's the result of all of this? Well, it means that some rich people who are pensioners are going to get it. It's better than what it was before. I'm not an advocate for giving rich people money. Everyone gets it and then they claim it back from the rich later on. I think a universal system is better. You just eliminate the idea of having a means-tested system, which is expensive and complicated, and of course results in people losing out. Ed Miliband is surprisingly good at TikTok. He gets a huge amount of pushback, wrongly so. I think he's doing a pretty good job, but he's extremely unpopular on social media. But I think a lot of it is on social media. The right hate Ed Miliband because a lot of them are in the pocket of the fossil fuel industry. Would Labour consider Andy Burnham as leader? I think there's certainly a case for that for him, but he's not an MP, so he'd need to become an MP. Starmer simply does not understand PR. Media reform is needed now. Yes, you're right, Kevin. He thinks. I think Starmer looks at got his training or something from 1990s Blair videos or 2000s politicians videos. Where you don't point but you use your thumb, or you have to. Roll up your sleeves. I really hate that. I really hate the way politicians roll up their sleeves and it's like, now I'm ready to get to work. It's so pathetic. It's so 90s or early 2000s. People don't like that anymore. This fake getting your hands dirty, getting down and dirty, rolling up your sleeves to get down to work. It doesn't work with people anymore. The sad thing is, people believe Farage to be authentic. He's not authentic. He's a privately educated millionaire pretending to be a working class bloke, but he comes across as authentic. When you see him smoking a cigar or drinking a pint in the pub, you imagine him being like that. He's very good at cosplaying. So when Stormer or others try to not copy that, but try to emulate something that they're not, they fall flat on their face. Like Kemi Badenoch. I remember the video of Kemi Badenoch in her kitchen. It wasn't her kitchen. It was probably somebody else's kitchen or a studio, or it was in B&Q or something. We'll have a kitchen in the background. Obviously, it was like there was no family in the picture. There was no photographs, or like there was nothing connected to a family. She was trying to talk about family and everything like that, but it was cold. It was empty. She wasn't able to. Anyway, I'm not going to double down on that. So it seems that Reform have a new councillor, a new leader, a new chairman, and we'll have to wait and see what he does. Badenoch, internet hacker. Yes, that's true. Was he the son of a tool maker? Stormer, I recall someone says that. Every time he mentioned it, people would laugh. Scott's Dog, thank you so much for that super chat. Greatly appreciated. Donations are often corrupt and in inducement, but don't be a meanie. A $5 for Max, but that's not a bribe as long as he wears his mankini. Thanks for that. No mankini tonight, unfortunately, or fortunately, as the case may be. Thanks, Scott's Dog. Reform UK Council to hold second by-election. A second by-election is to be held in the newly led Reform UK Council just a month after the party swept to power. Reform secured a landslide victory in May, winning 65 seats across County Durham to take control of the county council. Easington, am I saying it right? Easington and Sutton Council John Bailey has announced his resignation due to ill health. It comes after former Benfield side member Andrew Kilburn, Jesus, how am I reading these things, was forced to resign for failing to declare that he was employed by the local authority. A by-election will be held on the 3rd of July. Now, look, if one guy is sick, has ill health, that's not Reform's fault. But we've seen a number of cases where there have been by-elections because, well, the Reform candidate or the Reform councillor didn't want to do their job, basically. Now, this, of course, is a cost to the council. So is Reform UK going to pay for this? They keep talking about waste. Doge, they keep saying we need Doge to get rid of council waste. So I presume that Zia Youssef or the new chairman would put their hand into the pocket and pay for this, but probably not. Brad, thank you so much for that super chat as well. When Farage passes away, while we're all celebrating, the BBC will have to shut down for 3 weeks. All its reporters take bereavement leave. You joke, but it's true. Can you imagine? It would be like when the Queen died. It'll be 3 weeks of mourning, and there'll be like 3 weeks of wall to wall what Farage said, what Farage didn't say, Farage's background. Oh yeah, it'd be terrible. In Ireland, we say don't speak ill of the dead, so we won't be able to say anything bad about Nigel Farage whatsoever. I'll have nothing to say at all. The Wizard of Clacton offered the Heart of Thinking a yellow brick road around the edge of the flat earth they believed in, and they're all falling for it right over the edge. Well said. That's nice. Yes. Follow me along the yellow brick road. I want to know if they let Aaron Banks into the council offices. Aaron Banks is going to be in charge of Doge, I believe. the guy who has a lot of money offshore. And it was wonderful because I don't have the clip, but it was wonderful. Somebody from Joe Politics asked Nigel Farage about Aaron Banks and his offshore bank accounts, and Farage sort of tried to dodge it and says, well, there are a lot of companies are leaving and a lot of millionaires are leaving because of house prices, and you can't start a business and the economy is kaput. So it was a sort of trying to turn it around and blame the Conservatives and to blame Labour for people offshoring their money. So if Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister, will we see more offshoring? Of course we will, because these people don't believe in... I believe Aaron Banks paid £12,000 last year in tax in the UK. £12,000. He has many businesses. He's a multimillionaire, but he paid £12,000. There are people who are maybe taxi drivers or small business owners who would pay more than that. But Aaron Banks, just 12,000. Yeah, I saw that earlier. It's because he doesn't like to be challenged about tax havens. I don't think Farage will turn the UK into a tax haven. But I would love to see Nigel Farage's accounts, because it would be interesting to see how much he has offshore himself. It's amazing people believe this charlatan. Unfortunately, they do. See, Farage is good at convincing people that he's not lying to them, he's lying to other people. Like Trump, where all these people who voted for Trump, and I did a video about it earlier, a lot of people voted for Trump hoping that he would punish other people, he wouldn't punish them. Small business owners, farmers, immigrants even. There were Cubans for Trump. There were Latinos for Trump. And they honestly believed, well, he's not going to come for us because we're here legally, or we're supporting. I think there's this idea that if I'm supporting him, he won't come after me. They don't care. Trump doesn't care. His accountant is better than Jimmy Carr's, I bet. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's move on, and then we'll take a short break. Having a problem with my computer. I'll show you this. This is quite funny. So our friend Robert Jenrick.
What do you think about?
The guy who likes to play Batman on the tube. So he's moved on to his next scam. Can you call it a scam, or can you call it just a stunt? In Maya language, Farage means vagina. So Nigel Farage is literally a fanny. Thanks, Brad. It reminds me of the episode that movie. Was it the movie or the show with Borat, where Borat meets Borat goes to America, and he's sitting in a Republican, I think a Republican politicians or a Republican person anyway, their home. He's talking about Barbara Bush, and he goes, Barbara Bush in Pakistan, Bush means something else. Anyway, they were not impressed. Batman is on the case again. Yes, so let's have a look at Batman.
Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor.
I think she's paying the She has no life experience, no business experience.
Not keen on her anyway, are we?
Okay, this is something I love about politicians, particularly on the right. They say, well, we can't have somebody who has no business experience running the government. We need somebody with business experience. Yes, but businesses and the government, public services, are completely different. Like a business maximizes profit, cuts costs. But if you're running a public service, you're providing a service to the public, and you should not be profit driven. You shouldn't be trying to cut costs just for the sake of cutting costs. In some cases, you have to cut costs. You have to balance the budget, or you have to control your budget. But this idea that you should have a business person running the country, it's insane. Because the business person would say, well, like, a simple example, a bus service for the elderly. Okay, a public service. There are some elderly people who live on the edge of town. the council or whoever believes, okay, as a public service, we're going to send a bus service out to them to pick them up, to take them into town. Look, it's not profitable, but it's a public service. Now, a business person would look at that and say, well, you're not making any money out of this, so close it down. So this is the problem with having business people running, and this is just a very simple example, but having business people run government departments is an insane idea, because they would run it like a business, but a business and a public service are completely different. For example, I think it's No Justice brought it up many moons ago about the NHS. The NHS has a huge amount of redundancy, but it's necessary to have redundancy in the NHS because the NHS doesn't operate day to day in the same way. There are periods where there is high demand and less demand. So, for example, during winter, you may need to have extra staff on. You may need to have extra resources. You need to have contingency. You need to have redundancy or contingency for emergencies or for particular periods of the year. You couldn't run a business like that. And anyone say, well, you need to have business people, because business people will come in and say, look at all these staff standing around not doing anything. Lay them off. And then there's a crisis, and then you go, oh, okay, let's look for new staff. But then you can't because, well, you can't find them anymore. Or we have this warehouse full of stuff. We're not using it. Close it down. Sell off the stuff. Dump it, whatever. It's just waste. It's just costing us money. And then there's a crisis and you need the PPE or you need whatever. And then you don't have access to it. And you have to buy it in at the moment, which is more expensive. So the idea of business people running a public service is insane. And it doesn't make any sense. Or, as both insanity and lack of sense is the same thing. Anyway, let's get back to Batman.
What do you think about Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor?
I think she's paying the
I actually think this is not real members of the public. I think these are actually... let me try and zoom in a bit because it's a little bit easier to see. I think these are not members of the public. I have a feeling that these are like Tory supporters or Tory councillors even.
has no life experience, no business experience.
Not keen on her anyway, are we?
No. Borderline incompetent.
Out with depth, I think.
She hasn't got much idea what she's doing.
She lied on her CV, said she was an economist. Turns out she was working in the complaints department at Halifax.
If they found out I'd lied on my CV, I'd lose my job instantly.
They're lying all the way along, aren't they?
Taxes just going up.
I presume Robert Jenrick has a massive problem with his old friend, what's his name? Michael Green. As long as, it's a good job that Michael Green didn't become, defense secretary.
Up and up and up.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, when is it going to stop?
If she's going about lying about that, what else could she be lying about to us? She lied about...
You're talking to a Tory about lying. Obviously, these people are either Tory supporters or they're members of the Conservative Party.
Winter fuel payments.
Very disappointed. When you've paid all those taxes, why did you take it off the pensioners?
She lied about the farm tax.
My ambition always, my son was keen.
The farm tax. She lied about the farm tax. Okay.
My ambition always, my son was keen on farming. The idea was, yes, I'd like to hand the farm over to him. We're almost certainly going to have to sell.
We're now spending £1 billion a month on benefits to migrants. How does that make you feel?
Okay, I haven't seen this. I'm actually playing it along with you guys. But, remember, immigration increased dramatically. It was record immigration numbers when the Conservatives were in power. So Robert Jenrick is going out to probably Conservative supporters and saying, hey, isn't it terrible that immigration numbers are going up?
Politely not happy. That was the first thing they did, pay the train drivers.
£15.3 billion on migrants coming to the country. That's all those hotels. £105 billion a year and rising is now being spent on debt interest alone.
Oh, yeah, I know, it's shocking.
Like Robert Jenrick is trying to portray this as it all happened overnight. Not that it has been happening over the last 14, 15 years. No. Suddenly, as soon as Labour came in, national debt exploded. Like this guy, he should join Reform and then snipe from the sidelines. At least if he was in Reform, we could say, well, he's no longer a member of the party that was in power. But of course, he was a member of the party in power. So he can't even if he joins Reform, he's not going to get off the hook. Liz Truss debt. It's pathetic, this clip. Set up like 30p Lee Max with 28 months. That's quick. Yes. Rose exponentially after Brexit. The point system in action. As soon as Farage is Prime Minister, I guarantee everyone will be given a dozen slaps in the face on prescription. National debt went up 1.8 trillion under the Tories. Bloody hell. But don't look at the Tories.
This shows payroll in the UK.
Oh, that's alarming.
I just want a bit more money in my pocket. It just gets taken away. So, yeah, it's difficult.
I think she ought to be sacked. End of story.
There you go. This video didn't do as well as the one in what do you call it, in the train station, unfortunately. So he's going to have to double down on his attacks on. Maybe his needs to be a bit more authentic. This one was not so authentic. It obviously smells a bit like, hey, I'll go out and meet some members of the Conservative Party on the street. Let's organise, and then I'll interview them and pretend that they're actually real people. Do you remember when Rishi Sunak went to a factory to meet with real workers, and then it turned out that like 3 of them asking questions were Tory councillors? And it was like, Prime Minister, do you believe we're spending too much on immigration? And that's a very good question. Yes, I think we're spending too much on immigration, and we need to reduce it by sending people to Rwanda. Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you for answering my very difficult question, and you've done a wonderful job in responding. Ask Bob a job. If the going rate is still 12 grand. Yes. And then didn't he help somebody get out of paying tax of £45 million? So anyway, Ivan, thank you so much for that super chat. The whole winter fuel payment system is wrong. There are so many people who are not pensioners and are struggling with heating bills too. It's really, and this is something that I think we're going to see more of, and thanks for that super chat. We're going to see more of this idea of pandering to the boomer generation. You know, there's so many people who are not pensioners. Pensioners, this is not about me attacking pensioners. The pensioners are in this situation. They did not choose to be in this situation. But political parties are prioritizing one group over another group. You know, there's so many people who are struggling to pay their bills. There's so many people who are struggling to get by. The government have to U-turn on PIP, on the changes to PIP. They have to U-turn on the cuts to benefits. They have to U-turn on these things. Like, they've U-turned on the winter fuel allowance. Okay, that's good. But they have to U-turn on the cuts they've made and the changes to PIP, because this is impacting so many people. Are we going to see it? I don't know. Unfortunately, while Reform and the Conservatives care about pensioners, well, pretend to care about pensioners, they certainly don't care about people on benefits or people on disability support. So Reform are not going to demand changes to PIP, and the Conservatives certainly aren't. So unfortunately, I have a feeling that unless people in the media and campaigners put pressure on Labour, and this is where other political parties have an opportunity to attack Labour from the left. The Conservatives and Reform are not going to give a shit about people who are on benefits. They're not going to give a shit about the disabled. They're not going to give a shit about PIP. They only jumped on the bandwagon of the winter fuel allowance because they could make hay out of it. They could take advantage of the situation. But when it comes to everyone else, they won't give a crap. So this is an opportunity for left-wing parties, the SNP in Scotland, the Green Party in England, Plaid in Wales, for them to attack Labour from the left and say, you should be doing, okay, you did a U-turn on the winter fuel allowance. What are you going to do about PIP? What are you going to do about the benefit system? What are you going to do to help people who are struggling now? I hear there could be a Mankini tax in the works. I don't know whether I support that or not. if it's to reduce consumption, like tax on alcohol or tax on cigarettes, then maybe I would support that. The next election, 2029, yes, 2028, 2029. What about the next generation? Yeah, what about the next generation? What about housing? What about secure employment? Ivan, thank you once again for that super chat. Also, the nonsense of paying the winter fuel allowance is better off people, and then clawing it back is ridiculous. Don't give these better off people the payment in the first place. I disagree with you, and thank you for that. And I understand where you're coming from, but I tend to disagree because it makes sense to make it universal and then claim it back through taxes. So if people are paying a higher rate of tax, claim it back through that. You can make it also a way that if people want it, they have to make a claim for it. So it's available to everyone, but many richer people would probably go, look, for 200 quid, I couldn't be bothered. So they won't claim it. Especially if there are a few hurdles to jump through. But I'm of the idea it should be universal so that it covers everyone, because it's better that a few rich people get something than a few poor people just don't complete the paperwork correctly, or a few quid under the threshold, and then they end up losing out. Because at least if it's universal, it's cheaper. It's cheaper to have it universal because you don't have a bureaucracy involved in means checking. So I understand where you're coming from, and thanks for the support, but I tend to disagree when it comes to these things, because it actually works out cheaper to be for the taxpayer if it's universal, and it also catches everyone, as opposed to a means tested system where some people will slip through the net, and unfortunately we don't want that happening. Cost less for universal, says Stu. Yes. But they don't change the rubber sheets. Sorry, I'm not sure. I think I lost something there. Anyway, guys, we're about halfway through the stream. Halfway through the stream. So I want to take a short comedy moment, and we'll be back in just a jiffy with more serious stuff. Hope you enjoy this.
Another new Trump appointee has been very clear about the fact that he has no idea what he's doing.
In a new audio recording, Social Security Commissioner Frank Bisignano reveals that he had no idea what the job entailed when it was offered to him.
I get a phone call, and it's about Social Security. So I'm Googling Social Security, one of my great skills. I'm one of the great Googlers on the East Coast. I'm like, what the heck's the Commissioner of Social Security?
First of all, can you Google how to clear your throat? I mean, how do you not know what the Commissioner of Social Security does? He's the one who, hands out the championship trophy at the end of the Social Security season. But you knew that. But don't worry, because he's one of the great Googlers. Now, not in the whole country, just the East Coast, but that's still a big population area. It's pretty cool that the guy who's in charge of a $1.2 trillion agency is using the same tool I use to look up the name of the one black guy in Maroon 5. What up, Peach?
Oh my goodness, it's like what's happening in America eventually comes to Britain or comes to Europe as well. You have, the Lee Andersons are starting out in the US, and then they migrate to Europe and to the UK. Absolute idiots running the country. And Nigel Farage, and people are voting for Nigel Farage. Just look at what's happening in the United States and say, do you want to copy and paste the Trump administration into the UK? Hopefully not. Look at what's happening with Doge. Anyway, let's move on. So the spending review is tomorrow. So this is going to be interesting. What public services are going to be cut? What public services are going to be funded more? Let's have a look.
Well, it's that time of year again. It's the spending review. Really big moment, but it's quite complicated. There's a lot of numbers here, and it's taken a long time for me to get my head around it. So I want to give you just a distilled version of this. 5 things you really need to know about this spending review to kind of prepare you for it. Let's start with the first one. This is just showing you the big picture for UK public finances. You've got receipts, that's money coming in.
I just want to respond to Bill Silvers. Max, you're a Star Wars fan. Have you been watching Andor Season 2? A lot of what's happening really scarily similar to what's happening in LA right now. Yes, the Gorman massacre and the reach of the Empire as well, and how they stoked the rebellion against them as well. It's really, really interesting. Yes.
Our taxes going into the government, into the exchequer, £1.23 trillion. You've got expenditure. That is the money it's spending. And you'll probably have noticed, look, there's a difference between the two of them. We spend more than we bring in taxes, and the difference between those two things is borrowing. And when it comes to budgets, so as opposed to spending reviews, we often talk a lot, don't we, about borrowing and about taxes. This time, it's all about this. It's about the spending. But it's not about all of it, okay? Because the biggest chunk of this is actually known as annually managed expenditure. It's not really kind of managed. Some people would say it's not entirely controlled. This is pension spending. It's spending on benefits. It's spending on debt interest. It's the stuff you can't control on a year-to-year basis so easily. And so the spending review isn't about that. It's about this, departmental spending, £554 billion worth of departmental stories. So that is lesson number one, rule number one for this. It's not about all of the spending. It's really just about this chunk. It's a very big chunk, but it's certainly not about all of that spending. And we can break this chunk down into two further categories. I told you it was slightly complicated, but do not worry. So bear with me. You've got investment, so spending on building things, for instance, rail projects and so on. And then you've got what's known as current or day-to-day spending. So that is your spending on nurses' salaries, for instance. And if we just break this down a little bit further, okay? So break down where we are with that spending, day-to-day spending, you get a sense of where that money is spent right now. And this is critical, okay? Because what this spending review is about apportioning the money.
Look how much is spent on health and social care. And that's going to get bigger over the next number of years. Ivan, thank you so much for that super chat. But Max, it's not universal. As a poor disabled person, is not entitled to winter fuel payment. So no, it's not universal. Millionaire pensioners should not be getting it, full stop. I will hold firm on this. It should be universal. It should be available for all. So let me correct what I said before. It's universal for pensioners, but it's not universal for everyone. And you're completely correct. It should be universal for everyone. Make it available for everyone, including those who are disabled, like everyone. And then you cover everyone. Captain says, I'm disabled, I get a payment. I understand the point that people are saying that it shouldn't go to the rich. It should they shouldn't be getting anything. They should be taxed more. But I'd be off the idea that if you're going to, you should make it universal, but tax the rich as they, more on their salaries to cover the cost of making it universal. Because the concept of making it universal is a good idea, but of course there's a cost related to that. So it makes sense to tax the rich to cover the cost, because you can it's easy to tax the rich because you take it from their income. So you can increase set it on people who pay over 40% or 40p on the pound or whatever. But that's I think that's the way to go. But thanks for that, Ivan. But I understand your frustration. I understand your anger, and it's completely justified.
We know the big picture, we just don't know who is going to get most of that money in the coming years. And it's health and social care is at the top of the list in previous years. You've got education, you've got defence, you've got other departments as well, big fight over the Home Office. But here's the second thing you really need to know about the spending review. It is supposedly going to be a zero-based review.
Sorry, it's an emotive issue. It's discriminatory towards people who are not pensioners. But they struggle terribly. And this is why I think it's so important that we see more pressure applied from parties on the left, like the Greens, the SNP, Plaid, and independent MPs to the government going forward, that it's, there was a victory for pensioners in a sense when it came to winter fuel, but there needs to be more support for people who are disabled in particular, because they would, while pensioners are being looked after at the moment, so many millions of people are not, and there needs to be pressure applied to the government, and real pressure. MPs need to really feel the heat, and they have to try and turn this thing around.
What does that mean? It means theoretically, each of these departments has to not just say, we'd like a little bit more, they have to justify every single pound spent by their department. It's a massive deal if that is indeed the case. But a lot of people are quite sceptical about it, because if that is the case, then these bars could go all over the place. As it is, most people think they're just going to go up or down by a little amount. So we will have to see. But certainly, the history is a big thing to bear in mind here, okay? Because I was showing you those different departments there. Some of them have done a lot better than others over recent years. So this is showing you the overall pace of day-to-day spending in recent years, okay? So we're going back to 2006-07 here. That's the overall number. You can see COVID there kicking in there. Look at health, okay? So health spending has done much better than the average, okay? So compare that red line with the average. But it's a different picture for some other departments. So education, it hasn't done quite as well as health has. A little bit above the average, but not, not by an enormous amount. And then they've got other departments. So the Home Office, for a long time, was really struggling. But of course, you've got a lot of money that needs to go into the Home Office to pay. This in particular was paying for things like migration and asylum. There's been a question mark over how that line is going to go in the future, and a big fight. Well, is it a fight? Is it a disagreement between Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, and the Chancellor? So,
does that spike include the 750 million to Rwanda?
Home Office going to be one to watch as well. And then other departments like Justice. Think about what's happening in the courts right now. Think about all of the problems they're having there.
This graph is really important when it comes to justice. I just want you to look at it for a moment. Look at where justice is. Now, you're going to see a lot of, and this is going to play into a narrative that Farage is going to benefit from. If you look around at graffiti, if you look at social decay, you're going to look at rising crime. The Tories did not invest enough in justice over the last number of years. And who is going to benefit from that? It's going to take years to recover from that. But this is one of the most apparent things for people. They look around, they see graffiti, they see teenagers vandalizing stuff, they see a lack of police officers, they see a rise in crime, and they're angry with the government. And they're going to vote for a party who say, we will fix this. Because it's going to be even if Labour injected a huge amount of money in it tomorrow, it's going to take a long time to fix the problems that the Tories... I've been saying this for so long. You could pump billions, hundreds of billions into any government department, but it's going to take years to undo 14 years of rot. It's like if you have mold on a wall and it's seeped all the way into the concrete blocks. Just scraping it away is not going to... You're going to have to remove everything, and it's going to be costly, it's going to take time, and this is what the Labour government have in front of them. Even if they try and fix it straight away, it's going to take time. Even if they pump huge amounts of money. And who's going to be on the sidelines going, they're not doing anything. You're not seeing your town improve. This is why it's so important that there's a huge amount of money being transferred to the poorest in society to improve their lives. Otherwise, they're going to vote for Nigel Farage, and Farage is not going to make their lives better.
This chart is a big part of that story, and we're going to learn, aren't we, whether that line's going to go up and try and improve things in courts or indeed not. And then finally, one other just worth being aware of, given it is such a big story right now, defence. If you look at the overall picture, and this is day-to-day spending, and it's worth just saying for defence, a lot of the spending is investment spending. But still, day-to-day spending, defence actually is quite considerably down on the overall across Whitehall. So that's the big picture. The other thing that's worth just saying, okay, when I was talking about different departments, the real question, what we know, okay, is we know that this is how much investment spending is increasing in the coming years. What we don't know, for instance, is where that investment spending is going to be spent. So how is that going to be divided between different departments?
It's looking likely to be divided between defence and health. So the other government departments are not going to receive a huge... If they're going to receive any money, it's going to be a little bit. But if there's also the possibility that they won't see any money at all.
That's what this spending review is going to work out. For 4 years when it comes to investment, and for 3 when it comes to day-to-day spending. And that is the big thing. Where is health in there?
Trip says, do councils get a yearly budget? I think it's a bi-yearly budget. I think they get a budget every 2 years, but I could be wrong on that. Max, there are anti-immigrant protests happening in loyalist areas tonight. Keep an eye on it. Yes, I actually want to move on to that because let me see if I should have it here. Let's move on to that story because I think it's important. This is a huge problem. What's happening in Northern Ireland is ignored because, well, Northern Ireland is not considered important for for Westminster. Why are my links not working? Oh, crap. Ivan, thank you so much once again for that. I don't usually comment on posts by the Tories due to boosting the posts in the algorithm, but Mel Stride was giving lectures earlier and I couldn't really hold back. Well, you're right. Well done. You know, the Mel Stride, horrible individual. I put him maybe not on the same level, but close to the same level as what's her name? Therese Coffey. No, I have to call her Dame Therese Coffey now because you remember she was sent to the House of Lords or she was knighted or whatever. Thanks, Ivan, for that. Don't hold back. I once tried to get on to policy exchange questions and answers, but they wouldn't take any questions from me, unfortunately. I want to cover this story because it's something that's these are things that are bubbling up behind the scenes. Of course, because it's happening in Northern Ireland, it's not going to be really covered in GB, but it's important story to cover. Ballymena riots branded racist thuggery by UK police forces ready to step in. So it says the PSNI have confirmed officers from England and Wales are standing fast and ready to support in the wake of disorder in Ballymena last night as a senior officer branded the scene's racist thuggery. The PSNI also confirmed that there will be significant policing operation in the town over the coming days and that arrests will follow. It comes after 15 PSNI officers were injured and 4 homes were set ablaze as trouble erupted in the town last night. Mass thugs threw missiles at officers and a police car was attacked during the disorder, which police described as racially motivated. It flared following an early vigil over the alleged sexual assault of a teenage girl in County Antrim town. There has been widespread condemnation across the political divide, including from the office of the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who described the scene as very concerning. At a police briefing today in the aftermath of last night's scenes, a senior police officer branded the disorder in the town as racist thuggery pure and simply. Assistant Chief Constable Ryan Henderson said the attacks in County Antrim town should be loudly condemned by all right-thinking people. Any attempt to justify or explain it as something else is misplaced, he said at a press conference in Ballymena Police Station. Mr. Henderson branded the numerous attacks as clearly racially motivated, while strongly condemning the violence. What we saw something like this, was it last year during the Farage riots? Remember the Farage riots? Well, something similar was happening in Northern Ireland. It wasn't really covered that much in the news in GB, but it was the same people basically. The far right were rioting in England. The far right were rioting in Northern Ireland because there are connections between far right groups in England. Combat 16, Combat 18, and the National Front have links to loyalist groups and loyalist paramilitaries in Northern Ireland. So, what do you remember? Do you remember not that long ago where I was talking about how an immigrant family were told by the PSNI, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, that they had to negotiate with the loyalist paramilitaries in order to move into an area? Not that somebody told them to do that. The Police Service of Northern Ireland told them you need to negotiate with the loyalist paramilitaries in order to move into this town, onto this street. So thoughts on sanctions on the 2 Israeli ministers. I actually wanted to cover that as well. So we're almost at the end of the stream. So I tend to jibber jabber a bit too much and then run out of time. So let me see if I have it up here. No, I don't have it here. Let me bring up this story instead. It's from Channel 4.
They arrived looking for food. They fled in despair and chaos. More than 100 injured, at least 17 dead, according to health officials in Gaza. Killed in a rain of gunfire and artillery.
So what's happening here is that the Israeli government, along with the United States, have set up, as we know, a so-called charity organization to distribute food. But instead of, as the United Nations does, instead of actually taking the food to the people, they said, here is the food over here, open the gate and let people come in. And then obviously people who haven't been able to access sufficient quantities of food over the last number of months pile in, and there's chaos. And then how did the mercenaries, the American mercenaries, deal with this? They deal with it by shooting at people. Now, unfortunately, it's very difficult to get access to the correct information because the Israeli government does not allow journalists into Gaza. They have said, well, no, we're not going to let people in. And the reason they say so is because they say, well, for public safety issues. And we can't protect them either. And we know that and we believe that if they go in, well, Hamas will set the narrative. So we don't allow journalists in. But they'll say, well, you shouldn't believe anything that Hamas says. But if you're not, on the one hand, you're saying we don't want people to go in because they shouldn't trust Hamas. But on the other hand, well, you can't trust Hamas because there are no journalists there. You can't have it both ways. But it's interesting also that the British government has sanctioned 2 Israeli ministers, 2 far-right ministers, one involved, I believe, in terrorism, literal terrorism. He was arrested for that, I believe, at one stage. Or I don't know if he went to jail, but he was definitely, I think he was convicted of terrorist charges. A far-right settler, and he represents the settler community in the West Bank. And he has come out a number of times saying that the Palestinians need to be kicked out. There's no right to return. He wants to annex the West Bank. He wants to annex Gaza. He wants to turn the whole place into a greater Israel. So the British government and others have imposed sanctions on these 2 individuals, have sanctioned them, froze their assets, or have put out a request for them to be arrested if they arrive in the UK. Now, are they going to go to the UK? Of course not. But it's going to be interesting how this all pans out later on, because there have been charges brought against the British government in particular for aiding and abetting the Israeli government in this, in what they're doing in Gaza, in carrying out these airstrikes, these massacres. And British government officials, or maybe even government ministers, could be in serious trouble because they could be dragged before a tribunal. They could end up in The Hague saying, well, I didn't actually know that this was going on, or I was just following orders. But that won't fly. So there's a real risk that British citizens could be in serious trouble. And I'm talking about politicians or civil servants who went along. If it's legally defined as a genocide and Israel is held to account over that, then there are British companies, British diplomats, British politicians that could be in some serious trouble. The BBC are refusing to air a report on Gaza medics until timing right. Commiserations, hope they don't. I know where this is going, Killer, and I want your problem. What is your problem with Labour? Okay. Ben Viger was so extreme for the IDF refused him service. My goodness. It'll be dismissed by the UK. I honestly don't know why the UK is still going along with this. What's the advantage of backing Israel even at this stage? Like, I can understand business ties, but is it really worth it at this stage? Like, the situation is getting worse and worse. It's not going to get better. And when Keir Starmer and others say, well, we still support a two-state solution. Sorry, a two-state solution is gone. It's dead. It's not coming back. Like, what? Even if Netanyahu is removed from power and a new government comes in, what do you think that government is going to do about the West Bank? Is it going to demolish all of these Israeli settlements? Of course it's not. Because you have too many people in there now. You have all these Israeli settlers who just move there, build a house or take over someone else's house and say, this is my house now, this is my... And they had the backing of the Israeli government. Now, is another Israeli government going to go, no, actually, we're not going to support that anymore? Israel's reputation on the world stage, there are innocent people on both sides, and there are people on both sides who want this to end. But unfortunately, you have this lunatic in charge in Israel who needs to be in a constant war. Because as soon as the war ends, then he's going to face corruption charges and he could end up in prison. And the people within his administration know this, so they want to extend this because they see, as long as the war continues, there's a land grab available for us. If Ben Viger and Braverman had a child together, it would make Putin look like candy. Yes, definitely. The Chinese are the ones calling Type 56 Poland. I don't know what that's about. With all due respect, that lunatic government represents the will of the people. It does. That's why there need to be elections, and they need to be removed from power. People need to vote them out. But the government is insane. You have a guy who's trying to stay in power to avoid jail, like Donald Trump to a certain extent, and he's surrounded himself with people who do not believe in human rights. They believe that God has decided this land is for you, and anyone who's anywhere near that land need to be kicked out, and no compromise whatsoever. These settlers believe that this is our land, and if you happen to be in this place at this moment, you have to go, and we'll use violence to get you out. There was a documentary by the BBC. I forget the name of it now. The Settlers, I think it was called, and it's eye-opening because we generally in secular countries tend to think that, well, we follow the rules, and there are religious people who are maybe a bit extreme, but they're kept in a box. They're not in charge. But unfortunately, in certain countries around the world, the religious people are in charge, and they fully believe what they say and what they do, and you can't reason with people like that. A bit like America, yes, at the moment. Things will get better in America. I'm not sure about in the Middle East, though. And on that note, we'll have to... Well, I just want to cover one final story, maybe a positive story. Maybe it's a positive story, maybe it's not. I'm not a huge advocate for this, but I wanted to cover this story just in case. Why the UK has warmed up to nuclear power again. For years, nuclear power was a dirty word. Now the tide is turning. For the past 20 years or so, global nuclear power has stagnated amid concerns about its environmental damage and its safety after the Chernobyl and Fukushima disasters. Another nail in its coffin appeared to be applying to record delays and spiraling costs, while wind and solar plummeting cost and soared in supply. But leaders are warming up to nuclear power again, driven by a few key trends. So this is related to the government committing £14.2 billion for a new nuclear power station. Now, I'm not an expert, as you can imagine, but My biggest concern with nuclear is not so much the waste. The waste is an issue. My biggest concern is with corruption, because as we saw when the Conservatives were in power, what did the Conservatives do when it came to handing out contracts? They gave contracts to their friends and donors. So my biggest concern with nuclear power is the people running it will be private companies, and we saw with the water companies as well. If the private companies are running it, they're going to cut corners. They're going to say, well, do we need to carry out all these safety measures? Do we need to hire all these safety engineers? You know, we haven't had an accident yet. And this is my biggest concern, that private companies, the private sector will cut corners, and then you will have an absolute disaster. And then who picks up the pieces? The taxpayer and the public and the environment. You know, we saw it with Chernobyl. But of course, Chernobyl was not in private hands. It was under state control. But the same mentality was there. It was about cutting costs, about cutting corners. So I'm not about Max. It'll be through PE. That'll be fine. Alpha the go-to. Privatizing is a death toll on us all, yes. 0 days since last accident. So close but so far. Privatized prisons was the beginning of the end, yes. Because it's about cutting costs. Well, what are some of the biggest costs? Staff are a huge cost. You know, when you're running a nuclear power plant, you want to make sure that you have enough staff. Now, the government can set regulations, the government can set controls, but businesses will always try to find a way to get around. Oh, the inspector is coming tomorrow. Let's bring in some people. You have to work tomorrow, but then let people go after that, or bring in contractors to make it look like, you know, you have a full team on board. The companies will find ways to get around the problem. That's why it should be in public ownership. But as the report had pointed out, the price of the wind and solar is dropping all the time. We need to move to something more stable, like, for example, battery technology, where you can back up wind and solar when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. So guys, I want to say thank you so much to everyone who came on tonight. Thank you so much in particular to Ivan for your super chat, and to the others as well. Thank you so much for your support. Thanks to the moderators for doing a wonderful job. I have a video dropping tomorrow. It's the interview with Zach Polanski. I hope you're going to be able to see that. I hope it was interesting. We had a lot of questions from both from you guys on Discord and from the YouTube channel. So many questions. I wasn't able to cover them all, but I tried to put I want to say thanks to Killer for putting a lot of them together to try and make it easier to cover as many topics as possible, because there was a lot of duplication and some questions were a bit too long to ask. But hopefully he answers your questions in one way or another. I hope to get him back maybe when he becomes leader of the Green Party, and maybe we could get him on a live stream. So I'd love to start doing live streams with people again. I think they were quite popular. I think you guys liked them. So it'd be great to have somebody on and we can ask them questions in real time. So hopefully you enjoyed the interview tomorrow. It's about half an hour long, so it's not too long, but unfortunately we weren't able to ask him as many questions as I wanted, and I hope I didn't glaze him too much. You know, I admire what he's doing, but I think the interview was important, because I think the Green Party needs somebody who's charismatic, somebody who can lead it better than the previous people who are doing it, with the exception, of course, of Caroline Lucas, who was a force to be reckoned with. But under the new leadership, I don't think they're getting a lot of traction, and they need to focus on a charismatic figure. Anyway, guys, we're almost at the end, so I want to say thank you to everyone who posted, everyone who smashed the like button, to the moderators, and to all those sending a super chat. So I hope you enjoyed this.
Welcome to Broken News. Well, the tech world has been in a state of fevered anticipation ahead of the release of Apple's new range of products today. Rumours have been rife around what huge surprises the tech giant has in store for us, and our reporter has the details.
An iPhone that's 1 millimetre bigger, an iPad in a very slightly different colour than the other ones, and a MacBook you can't plug anything into are among the fresh and exciting new range of Apple products announced today. Prices are changing too, with the latest iPhone now available for only the cost of a 2015 Skoda Octavia liftback 1.6 TDI with 16-inch alloy wheels and hydraulic brake assist. And the new iPhone retains well-loved features like an easily smashable screen and a 34-minute battery life. Consumers will also be given the option to put all their data in iCloud or face a firing squad. At the product launch event, a man who isn't Steve Jobs anymore but has stolen his wardrobe, looks a bit like Ellen DeGeneres and talks like a Texas pig farmer, announced a unique new feature, a slightly different charger for every single individual Apple device. How wonderful. Back to you.
Thank you. Well, in a statement just released, Apple's chief technical officer said, "We haven't thought too much about these products. We don't need to anymore because nerds will buy them anyway at the full retail price, and some of them will even queue through the night like proper twats." What a lovely story. Well, that's all from Broken News. You're up to date.
It is true, isn't it? So guys, have a great week. I'll see you on Friday, same bad time, same bad channel. Stay safe, take care, and good night.